Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel for the JOJOLands Chapter 3 review titled Find the Diamond in the Mansion. As the story continues on, with Jodio and the gang pulling off the worst heist ever to steal the $6 million diamond from the Japanese tourist Rohan Kishibe. So getting right into it this month, Jodio very nonchalantly is the first person to enter the property as he's able to walk right in as Rohan is swimming, although he quickly takes cover and gets his hands on Rohan's iPad to investigate further, where he sees some half-drawn sketches of Rohan's iconic character Pink Dark Boy, which seems to be the same as from the original universe, as well as some photos of his dog Bakken. So Bakken is returning in the JOJOLands, and this is the dog who he adopted in the story Hot Summer Martha. And in my last chapter review, I mentioned that if this Rohan was any of the previous Rohans we had seen before, it would most likely be the version from Hot Summer Martha, which was from the Thus Spoke Rohan Kishibe series and took place in the year 2020, which is very close to the time period of the JOJOLands. So the most likely scenario, I think, is that Hot Martha Summer took place in the alternate universe without anyone even realizing it at the time, as that story released in between the time of Part 8 and Part 9, as we now see Bakken and Pink Dark Boy in the JOJOLands. And it just seems way too convenient that Araki went out of his way to include Bakken in this chapter, and it just seems like a little hint of Araki being like, hey, this is Rohan from 2 years ago, that story was actually in the alternate universe, just letting you know. So yeah, they just seem way too similar to be an alternate version, as alternate universe characters are always different in some way, even if it's just small, but pretty much everything about this JOJOLands Rohan is the same as Hot Summer Martha. So that's my theory, and I'm sticking to it, unless of course anything is revealed later on. So continuing with the chapter, as Jodio is doing some snooping, Dragona, Paco, and Usagi are breaking into the front of the mansion using smooth operators to unlock the door, I assume by rearranging the lock in some manner. And during the scene, Usagi takes notice of a cat roaming around outside. This cat appears multiple times throughout the chapter and may be connected to the secrets hidden within Rohan's vacation home, which we will discuss later on. As the three enter the home, Dragona instructs the two to look for the safe where the diamond could be stored and to not steal anything else, as it would just create more risk when passing through airport security later. But a page turn reveals Paco and Usagi stealing literally everything they can get their hands on, which is a funny scene, but also reflects their personalities, as Paco was described in chapter 1 as a kleptomaniac, as he is stealing money and random decor, while Usagi is rumored to have problems with substance abuse and is stealing alcohol. So between a psychopath, klepto, and drug addict, Dragona really seems to be positioned as the voice of reason and the leader of the group, while not being completely innocent, does seem to have the clearest head on their shoulders. So while the group is searching for the safe, roaming around the mansion, touching everything and destroying everything, Dragona finds a suspicious room filled with rocks scattered everywhere and a ton of chemistry equipment, which is quickly interrupted by Jodio's perspective, where he finds a bunch of volcano photos on Rohan's iPad, providing further context for his chemistry room. As in the photos, Jodio finds lava flows, cooled lava rocks, and a map. He also denotes that where the photos were taken is a dangerous location that isn't accessible by tourists, which is all pretty typical Rohan behavior, as in many of his short stories, he goes somewhere he's not supposed to and is confronted by the supernatural. So now seeing that Rohan is investigating the volcanic rocks, it can explain why he's here in Hawaii, as he most likely heard a rumor or read something about special volcanic rocks and thought to go investigate it for himself to inspire some ideas for his manga. So of course it was a massive twist from Araki that Rohan appeared in part 9, but now that we have more context, it's some really unique writing that's actually pretty cool, as it's almost like Jodio is interrupting an episode of Thus Spoke Rohan Kishibe. And how sick would it be if in a few months or like a year, Araki released a new episode of Rohan that was this story but from Rohan's perspective. So we saw how we found out about these rocks and how we ended up in Hawaii and what happens after. Sort of like a Tarantino style writing where we see things out of order that make everything make sense. But that's enough Rohan talk for now, so switching back to Dragona, Paco, and Usagi's perspective, as they look through Rohan's chemistry lab, they wonder if he's purifying drugs in all of the beakers or if he's doing some illegal drug business. And for the few people who commented on my last video saying that Jodio's arrest scene wasn't a Breaking Bad reference, or I was making a stretch, well, here we are again with another Breaking Bad reference, beyond just the chemistry lab and drug talk too, as Usagi goes ahead and explains the difference between a flask and a beaker, and how one is used for heating things up and the other is used for mixing and measuring, which is extremely similar to a scene in the first episode of Breaking Bad, as Walter explains the same thing to Jesse, the different instruments used for mixing and heating.
A volumetric flask is for general mixing and titration. You wouldn't apply heat to a volumetric flask. That's what a boiling flask is for. Did you learn nothing from my chemistry class?
So somehow, here we are again talking about Breaking Bad in a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure review. So it seems Araki really liked the series, not only referencing it 2 chapters in a row, but writing the plot and his characters in a way he's never done before. So we'll just have to see how much this series influenced Araki as the JOJOLands continues. And I am still praying for a Saul Goodman type lawyer character, as he would just be too perfect in this crime comedy story. So initially when I first saw all of these scattered rocks in the chemistry lab, I thought Rohan may have been studying a dead rock human or something like that. But as we get more context throughout the chapter, I think these volcanic rocks will be a much more significant plot point moving forward. So we are now at about the halfway point of the chapter, and here's where the pacing really picks up, as Rohan gets dressed and goes inside the mansion while the rest of the gang are still trying to crack open the safe inside the chemistry room. And during this tense moment, we get some pretty cool stand heist action, as Jodio activates November Rain to distract Rohan, meanwhile Dragona is using smooth operators to open the safe. And I love how he even refers to his stand as his kids, which is just adorable. So when they actually open up the safe, there's of course the 24 karat diamond, but also right next to it, obscured by a text bubble, is a chunk of cooled lava, which when leaving the room catches Dragona's attention, and he may or may not have stolen it. As it wasn't directly seen in this chapter, we just see him shoving something into Paco's bag, which could have been the diamond but also the lava rock that was in the safe. And leading up to this moment, if you remember from earlier in the chapter when I mentioned that Usagi noticed a cat outside, and since then this cat has been seen all over the villa. Jodio and Rohan had noticed the cat outside and remarked that it doesn't belong to either of them, and Araki really wants us to be suspicious of it, as well as it had walked up to Dragona's squad when they were opening the safe and then walked away. And when they try to escape, they are attacked by an unknown stand, a string type stand similar to say Stone Free or Doggy Style, that wraps around a target's limb and tightens enough to break the skin. The wire itself is similar to a thin translucent fishing wire, but strong enough to stop them from leaving. And as one of the attacks retreats, Usagi claims that this is no security system, but rather it's a stand and it belongs to the cat from earlier. And then the chapter ends off with Rohan realizing that stands are being used around him, specifically noticing Jodio's November Rain, as Jodio informs the rest of the group that Rohan is also a stand user and he can see them. And that concludes chapter 3. And I just love how on the last page, Jodio put his hood up, which is such a cool detail of his character design and how it's more dynamic than most, as he can put his hood up when he's using his stand to keep himself dry, which offers a unique look to the character in certain scenes and mixes up his design. But backing up a bit, I want to say that the Siamese cat in this chapter is kind of the star here, as the whole chapter was building up suspicion to it and it ends with it attacking the group. So why is there a cat stand user involved in this heist that apparently doesn't belong to anyone? So I think that this cat being a stand user is foreshadowing and an introduction to a new supernatural phenomenon within the series, being these volcanic rocks that Rohan is studying, similar to the way that Owasuke was this dog that introduced the phenomenon of the Rokakaka in JoJoLands. And that these volcanic rocks have the ability to grant stands when being around them or touching them, just like the other supernatural phenomenon found within the previous parts of the alternate universe that are usually bound to objects or locations, like Steel Ball Run's Devil's Palm and Corpse Parts and JoJoLands Walleyes, which would also explain the amount of natural stand users on the islands of Hawaii like our main cast, as potentially their environment and these mysterious volcanic rocks over time may have granted stands, being just another blessing from the earth, which Araki explained in part 8, just like the residents of Morio obtaining stands by being around the blessed lands. And the process which creates these supernatural volcanic rocks could play a part in Jodio's search for mechanisms, which if you remember in chapter 1, during his monologue about mechanisms, he was jumping towards an erupting volcano, possibly foreshadowing that the volcanoes and their mechanism will play a part in Jodio becoming filthy rich. And this theory that the volcanic rocks have special powers or are blessings from the earth is further vindicated by Rohan's interest in them, and him keeping one in a safe right next to the diamond. And now that we see why Rohan is really in Hawaii, which clearly seems to be these rocks, the diamond could be nothing more than a red herring, something to distract the reader from his real goal or anyone that tries to rob him from the real valuables, being the volcanic rock. As if someone's robbing you and they open your safe, they're most likely going to steal the shiny diamond more so than the dirty rock. So I think the whole reason for this cat being in the chapter, and the reason why the cat is a stand user, is because it was snooping around Rohan's mansion and may have even been exposed to the rocks, and was granted a stand ability and is now exercising some sort of protective instinct to protect the rocks, which is why it's attacking Dragona, Paco, and Usagi and not Rohan or Jodio, as they are the ones within the lab and maybe even trying to steal them. So I could definitely see the next chapter being pretty chaotic, as Rohan confronts the JoJolanders, probably beats all their asses, or they need to work together to stop the cat, and it all ends with a big explanation of Rohan as to why he's here and what the meaning of the rocks are, that will then continue the plot forward and maybe get Jodio interested in these volcanic rocks as well. And all of this could act as a solid prologue to the story, as Rohan introduces us to really the main plot point, and then we can get sailing like we saw in the promotional images of Jodio and Gergona on a boat, as we set off to explore the mechanisms and the mysteries of these volcanic rocks throughout the islands of Hawaii, which then would, explain the part's name, the JOJOLands, as we explore the various islands. So that's about gonna do it for my JOJOLands Chapter 3 review. I really think this chapter offered a lot of substance in terms of the implications for the future of the story, as well as subtly explaining Rohan's involvement and just kind of allowing the reader to piece together the story with a lot of context clues. And of course, more Breaking Bad is always welcomed. So thank you all so much for watching the video. Please like the video if you enjoyed or you learned something new, and subscribe for more JoJo, JOJOLands, anime, and manga content. And hopefully, I'll see you all in my next video. Until then, peace.